Why some seniors feel unwelcome in their own children's homes. They don't talk about this part, not in the parenting books, not in the retirement seminars, not even in the long family dinners where smiles cover silence and everyone pretends everything is just fine. But you feel it, in your bones, in your breath, in the way you sit a little quieter on your daughter's couch or hesitate a moment before knocking on your son's door. It's that deep, aching question that no one wants to say out loud. Why do I feel like a stranger in my own child's home? You raised them. You sacrificed. You worked late shifts, skipped your own dreams, fed them before feeding yourself. You built a world for them with your hands, your back, your love. And now, after all that, you find yourself walking through their front door with a heart full of love, only to be met with something cold. It's not always words. Sometimes it's the silence, the way they glance at the clock, the way their spouse barely speaks to you, the way the grandkids run past without looking up, or how the whole room feels like it's moving around you instead of with you. You sit there unsure whether to speak or stay quiet, unsure whether you're helping or in the way. You want to believe you're welcome, but something in your chest says otherwise. Something in their tone, their rush, their indifference, and no one says it, but you know you're not at home anymore. That realization doesn't come like a storm. It comes like a slow leak. It drips into your heart when they forget to call, when they say not now, when they forget your birthday or don't ask how your doctor appointment went. It settles in the quiet moments when you're in their house, but not in their world. And then the guilt creeps in. Am I being too sensitive? Am I expecting too much? You try to explain it to a friend, but you don't want to sound ungrateful. You try to swallow the hurt thinking it will pass, but it doesn't, because it's not just about one visit. It's about dignity. It's about feeling like you still matter. It's about knowing that your presence isn't just tolerated, it's cherished. If you've ever sat quietly on the edge of your child's life and wondered where you went wrong, this video is for you. If you've ever been told you're always welcome, but something about the way the door opens says otherwise, this video is for you. If you've ever walked away from a visit with your kids feeling more alone than when you arrived, this video is especially for you. We're going to talk about the truth, the quiet, painful truth, not because you're weak, but because you're strong enough now to name what hurts. We're going to talk about why some seniors, good, loving parents, feel unwelcome in their own children's homes. And more importantly, we're going to talk about how to protect your peace, how to reclaim your worth, and how to walk forward. Whether their home holds space for you or not, you are not invisible, you are not needy, you are not a mistake. And today, we start with that. It doesn't happen overnight. There's no announcement, no ceremony, no warning. One day, your mom and dad, the heart of the household, the one whose voice quieted storms and whose presence meant safety. And then, little by little, something shifts. They get married, they move out, they start families of their own. That's the natural way of things, life passing the torch from one generation to the next. You celebrate their growth, their independence. You tell yourself this is what you raised them for, to fly. But somewhere in the midst of that flight, something sacred starts to unravel. Your visits become shorter, less spontaneous. You stop having a key to the house. You start waiting for an invitation. You begin to notice that you knock now, when once you would have walked right in. The dinner table that once held your favorite seat now has a high chair in its place. Your photo on the mantle is surrounded by school portraits and vacation snapshots you weren't part of. The house is filled with their life, but not always space for yours. You start to feel like a visitor, a guest, polite, careful, slightly in the way. You tell yourself, it's okay, they're busy, they're building their own life. And you mean it. You do. But deep inside, you mourn what's changed. It's not about control. It's not that you want to make their decisions or reclaim their home. It's that you long for the closeness, the comfort of being seen not just as a parent from the past, but as a human being with a present. You remember the days they called you for everything, when they sat at your kitchen table for hours, when your advice was sought after, not avoided, when your presence meant home. Now, you wait for them to check their calendar before agreeing to dinner. You wonder if your stories are too long. You notice how they reach for their phones while you're talking, and maybe they love you deeply. But still, that shift has happened. You're not the center of their world anymore. You're a supporting character in a play that used to be yours. That doesn't make them bad. It makes them human. But it doesn't mean the pain isn't real. So many seniors live in this quiet ache, this unspoken grief over what was once sacred and now feels temporary. They tell themselves to be strong, to be proud, to not make a fuss. But your heart has a right to feel what it feels. It's okay to grieve the shift from being their everything to being an occasional visitor. It's okay to admit that being a guest in your own child's life sometimes hurts, and you are not alone in feeling that way. There's a heaviness that lives behind your child's smile sometimes. It's in the way they open the door, welcoming but hurried. It's in how they ask, "How long are you staying?" even before you've stepped inside. It's in the sigh they don't know you heard when you said, "I'll just stay the weekend." They don't say it, they'd never say it, but you can feel it. You've become a burden. Not because you've done anything wrong, not because you're demanding, but because life has made everything heavy, and your presence, no matter how gentle, adds to the load. They're juggling work, raising kids, bills, aging marriages, their own anxiety, and the constant feeling that there's never enough time. You show up because you love them, because you miss them, because you want to help. But they're so caught up in surviving that your arrival becomes one more thing they have to manage. Not enjoy, just manage. And the shame you feel when you notice it, that's real too. You find yourself doing more to earn your place. Cleaning dishes you didn't use, folding laundry that isn't yours, babysitting even when you're exhausted, laughing at jokes that aren't funny just to keep things light, quietly stepping out of the room when you sense tension, all to avoid becoming too much. But here's the heartbreaking part. Many of your children may not even realize how they're making you feel, because they assume you understand. They think, "Mom knows we love her. Dad knows we're busy." They get it. But they don't see the weight behind your eyes. They don't see you crying in the guest room at night after a long day of feeling invisible. They don't hear your prayers, asking, "What did I do wrong?" They don't see you wondering whether to come back next time or if it's easier to just stay away. They don't say you're a burden, but their exhaustion does, their tone does, their distracted conversations and constant busyness do. You came with love. They greeted you with weariness. You offered connection. They gave you polite obligation. And still, you love them. Still, you try. Still, you hope the next visit feels different. But let this truth rest on your heart. You were never meant to carry the weight of someone else's silence. You are not a chore. You are not a checklist. You are not another problem to solve. You are a soul with stories, a heart that still longs for connection, a parent who deserves respect, not just because you raised them, but because you are still here, still giving, still trying. And maybe it's time to stop waiting for them to say it. Maybe it's time to say it to yourself. I deserve to be more than tolerated. I deserve to feel welcome. And from this point forward, your peace does not have to depend on their comfort. You came to help. That's what you told yourself. I'll just stay for a few days to lend a hand. You packed your bags with love, not expectation. You showed up with casseroles, folded towels, hands ready to hold crying babies or rock the stroller. And for a while, it felt good. You were useful. You were part of something again. You belonged. But over time, something changed. Your short visit turned into an unpaid job. Helping turned into doing. Offering became expected. And gratitude, it started disappearing. Now, when you show up, there's already a list waiting. Can you pick up the kids from school? Would you mind staying with the baby while we run errands? We didn't get around to the laundry, do you mind? No, please. No, thank you. just assumption. Suddenly, your presence is less about you and more about what you can do. And let's be honest, you love your family. You love helping. But there's a difference between being helpful and being used. One nourishes the soul, the other slowly drains it. You didn't come to be a maid. You didn't come to be free daycare. You didn't come to clean up after adults who are perfectly capable. You came to connect, to be seen, to offer love, not servitude. But they may not see the line. They may not notice how you stay up late, cleaning dishes you didn't dirty, how you skip your rest so they can nap, how you cancel plans back home because they need you again. Because when someone becomes accustomed to your kindness, they stop seeing it as a gift. It becomes normal, expected, invisible. And the hard part? Saying no starts to feel like betrayal, like you're letting them down, like you're being selfish. But here's the truth. Helping out of love is beautiful. Helping because you're afraid not to. That's not love. That's quiet self-erasure. You don't owe anyone your energy just because you share DNA. You are not less valuable when you rest. You are not more lovable when you serve. If your help is no longer met with appreciation, but with entitlement, it's okay to step back. You are allowed to choose your peace over their convenience. You are allowed to say, I came here to visit, not to be taken for granted. Because one day, you may no longer be able to offer help. And when that day comes, you'll want to know your presence was valued, not just your usefulness. It doesn't always look like shouting. Disrespect isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, passive, wrapped in politeness. And that's what makes it harder to name. It's when they roll their eyes at your opinions, when they interrupt your stories at the dinner table, when they smirk at how you hold the phone or struggle with the remote. It's the sigh when you ask them to repeat something or the impatient glance when you don't move as fast as they want. It's in the jokes. Okay, boomer, they laugh, or you're too old to get it. They don't mean harm, they say. Lighten up, it's just teasing. But your chest tightens. Not because you're too sensitive, but because you can feel yourself being slowly pushed aside. This kind of disrespect doesn't bruise the skin. It bruises the soul. You start second-guessing your worth. You stop speaking up. You sit in the corner of the room instead of at the center. You shrink. And perhaps the most painful part is when they correct you in front of others, especially the grandchildren. As if your years of parenting, your wisdom, your entire life experience suddenly don't count. As if being older makes you irrelevant. They mean well, maybe. But meaning well doesn't erase harm. Disrespect doesn't need a raised voice. Sometimes all it takes is a lowered gaze, and you wonder, is this how they see me now? As outdated? As someone to tolerate, not honor? You remember the years you taught them to speak with kindness, to say please and thank you. You remember defending them when others dismissed them. You remember raising them to stand tall, and now you sit small. Now your stories feel like interruptions. Your thoughts feel like noise. Your presence feels like too much. This is not how it should be. Respect is not earned by being perfect. It is given because of who you are, because you have lived, because your hands have held life and loss and labor, because your presence in that house was once the foundation of everything they now enjoy. So no, you are not overreacting. You are noticing what others have learned to ignore. And you have every right to name it. You are not here to be mocked, dismissed, or silenced. You are not a relic. You are not an extra. You are a whole, breathing, worthy human being. And if they have forgotten that, it is not your job to convince them. It is your job to remember it for yourself, to hold your head high, to leave the room if needed, to set a boundary and say, I deserve better than this, because you do. And sometimes the quietest disrespect is the loudest reason to choose distance, not out of anger, but out of self-respect. There's a moment many older parents come to, a moment when they look at their grown children and think, I don't recognize this world they live in. Not just the technology, not just the language or the fast pace or the screen addiction, but the values, the way they raise their kids, the way they talk about work, marriage, identity, respect. It's not that they're wrong, it's that everything feels different. You grew up in a time where respect for elders was foundational, where you didn't speak back, where thank you and please weren't optional, where parents led and children followed, where family meant closeness, not just blood, but duty, care, loyalty. But now things feel upside down. Your adult children parent in ways you don't understand. They let the kids talk back. They negotiate every rule. They talk about gentle parenting, boundaries, space. They spend more time explaining to their child why broccoli is important than just saying, "Because I said so." And here's the hard part. When you try to share your thoughts, you're told you're old-fashioned. When you offer advice, they say, "That's not how we do things anymore." When you speak from experience, they act like you're out of touch. You don't mean to judge. You just see things through the lens of a different time. And sometimes that lens makes everything feel like a cultural mismatch, even in your own family. It's even harder when you and your child grew up in entirely different countries or speak different emotional languages. You may value silence, they want open emotional processing. You may offer love through action, they want verbal affirmation. You may sacrifice without complaint, they expect boundaries and emotional validation. So when you visit their home, you're not just walking into a different house, you're walking into a different world. And in that world, you sometimes feel like an outsider, not because they don't love you, but because you're no longer speaking the same language. And that gap? It can feel like a canyon. You want to connect, you want to understand, but sometimes you just feel tired of trying. And maybe in your quiet moments, you wonder if they'll ever know what it took to build the life they now live with such freedom. If they'll ever honor the sacrifices made in silence. If they'll ever understand that just because your methods were different doesn't mean they were wrong. But here's what you must remember. Bridges can still be built, not by forcing your way across, but by standing on your side with openness, not surrender. You can love without agreeing. You can let go of control without letting go of connection. You can say, "I see the world differently, and I still love you," even if they don't always say it back. There's a certain kind of pain that comes with wearing a mask. Not a physical one, but the kind you wear with a smile. The kind you put on when you knock on your child's door, knowing you'll have to shrink a little to keep the peace. The kind you wear when you say, "Everything's fine," even as your heart quietly breaks inside. You sit on their couch, hands folded politely, nodding at conversations that don't include you. You watch them move around the kitchen, half present, half distracted. You laugh at jokes that aren't funny. You excuse the dismissive tone. You pretend not to notice how the warmth you once knew has faded into formality. Because it's easier. You tell yourself, it's easier to smile than to stir the pot. Easier to say, "I'm just tired," than to admit, "I feel invisible here." You tell your friends, "They're just busy." You tell yourself, "At least I get to see the grandkids." You justify, you downplay, you minimize. But in the quiet of the guest room, when the house has gone still and you're lying awake with your thoughts, the truth finds you. You're lonely, not just in their house, but in your own heart. Because nothing is heavier than pretending you're okay in a place that no longer sees you, and no smile can fully cover the ache of being unseen, unheard, or misunderstood. You remember the days when your voice mattered in this family, when you were the one they ran to. Now, they run around you. And you wonder how much longer you'll keep visiting places where you have to wear a version of yourself that doesn't feel real. But you stay silent, because saying something feels like a betrayal. Because you don't want to hurt them, because you don't want to be that parent. Because you fear that if you speak the truth, the little connection you have left might shatter. So you stay. You shrink. You smile. And you break a little more each time. But here's what I want you to know. Pretending is not the price you must pay for love. Being quiet is not the requirement for being accepted. And showing up half alive just to keep the peace is not the kind of love you were made for. You deserve spaces where you can be fully you, where you can speak without walking on eggshells, where your presence is felt, not just tolerated. And if that space is no longer your child's home, that doesn't mean you failed. It means you're wise enough to stop performing and start protecting your soul. You don't need to pretend everything's fine. Because the truth? You're not here to survive visits. You're here to live a life that still feels meaningful, honest, and whole. Even if that means stepping away from where the love feels conditional. There comes a moment, quiet but powerful, when you realize that waiting for someone else to make you feel valued is a losing game. That moment might come while you're sitting in a car after another strained visit, or washing dishes in a kitchen that isn't yours, wondering why no one offered to help, or lying awake at night in the guest room, feeling more like an afterthought than a guest. And then something shifts. You stop asking, "What did I do wrong?" and start asking, "What do I deserve?" Because here's the truth, no one says out loud. You are allowed to choose yourself. You are allowed to decide that your peace matters more than appearances. You are allowed to create distance, not from love, but from pain. You are allowed to say, "This version of the relationship is hurting me and I need space." That doesn't mean you stop loving your children. It doesn't mean you shut the door forever. It means you stop walking into rooms that dim your light just to feel included. Dignity isn't pride. It's not arrogance. It's a quiet, rooted sense of "I know who I am." It's the decision to protect your time, your energy, your heart. You've spent your life giving, sacrificing, bending, softening for others. And for a time, that was love. That was necessary. That was parenting. But now your role is different. Now you are not responsible for everyone's happiness. Now your responsibility is to your own soul. And if showing up in your child's home leaves you feeling erased, used, or unwelcome, it's okay to visit less, to call less, to stop offering help that's not honored, to stop chasing a closeness that only hurts. Distance doesn't mean bitterness. Distance can be sacred. Distance can be healing, and it opens up room for peace, for clarity, for relationships that do nourish you. You can still love them. You can still pray for them. You can still send cards and celebrate milestones. But you don't have to show up in person to be a good parent. You don't have to endure disrespect to prove your love. You don't have to stay close to be connected. Reclaiming your worth means standing in the truth that you are not less valuable because someone else forgot how to treat you. Your age is not your weakness. It is your crown. Your wisdom is not outdated. It is earned. And your love? It is still deep, still fierce, still beautiful. But now it must be love for yourself too. So if you've been waiting for permission to stop visiting homes that no longer feel like home, this is it. You don't need an apology to set a boundary. You don't need understanding to walk away with grace. You only need the courage to say, "I matter too," and that single truth can change everything. You are not wrong for wanting to feel welcome. You are not too sensitive for feeling the shift. You are not overreacting when your chest ached in a house that used to hold your world. You are simply human, a parent, a person, a soul still longing to be seen, heard, and valued, not for what you do, but for who you are. And if your child's home has stopped feeling like a place where your heart can rest, then it's okay to step back. Not in anger, not in silence, but in wisdom, in strength, in deep, self-honoring truth, because the love you gave was real. And if it's not being returned with care, then love yourself enough to stop knocking on closed doors. Your story doesn't end here. It continues in the friends who do call you back, in the neighbor who smiles when you walk by, in the small joys, a good book, a quiet morning, a flower blooming on the windowsill. It continues in the dignity you reclaim when you say, "I will not stay where I feel small." You deserve to feel welcome, not just in someone else's house, but in your own life. So today, breathe deep. Let go of the guilt. Let go of the need to be needed, and step forward, not with bitterness, but with peace. Not with sadness, but with sacred clarity. You are not too much. You are not forgotten. You are not alone. You are worthy. Still, you are welcome somewhere, and you are loved. Always. Even if for now you have to love yourself a little louder to remember that. And that is not weakness, that is freedom.